Homoseksuaalisuus dekriminalisoitiin Suomessa vuonna 1971, jonka jälkeen homoseksuaaliset teot eivät enää ole rangaistavia. Samalla säädettiin kuitenkin heteroseksiä korkeammat suojaikärajat sekä niin sanottu kehotuskielto. Sen nojalla homoseksuaalisuuteen kehottaminen julkisesti oli kiellettyä vuoteen 1999 asti. Minkälaista sensuurikulttuuria kehotuskielto Suomessa synnytti? Mitä aktivistit tekivät lain kumoamiseksi? Suomen kehotuskiellon lisäksi vastaavanlaisia rajoituksia on ollut ja on nykyäänkin muualla. Tervetuloa seuraamaan puheenvuoroja Suomen kehotuskiellosta sekä Iso-Britanniasta, Unkarista ja Venäjän nykytilanteen taustoista.
Welcome everybody to the third section of today. This session is going to be held in English, and we are going to hear 4 presentations that discuss different anti-gay laws and propaganda laws, or as it was in Finland, the ban of incitement. That was a law that was in place in Finland from 1971 to 1999. And our first speaker is Ulf Månsson, who has been an LGBT human rights activist within the Finnish organization SETA and ILGA, International Lesbian and Gay Associations, since 1978. And he has been active in that position for a decade. Later on, he worked as a lawyer and was specialized in family and inheritance law cases, as well as he was involved in Greenpeace for some years. Now he's retired and lives part of the year in Helsinki and part in Barcelona. And from Barcelona, he is also now going to speak to us. You're welcome, Ulf.
Thank you, and greetings from Barcelona. Thank you for having me. I'm going to talk about the Finnish ban on homosexual propaganda, in Finnish kehotuskielto, Swedish uppmaningsförbudet, popularly named. Exactly the section 20, paragraph 9.2 of the Finnish Criminal Code. But I will start with the personal history. In 1981, when I was in my final years of my law studies, I participated in the yearly Gay Freedom Days, vapautuspäivät in Finnish, a demonstration with some dozens of participants in Helsinki. One random guy, he's not the one which is shown on the picture you have on the front of the website with that same sign. This guy in the photo is Kimmo Kahra, and he was a founder of SETA. But this random guy who came from the countryside, I think that nobody knew him and nobody saw him again afterwards. He had picked up a demonstration sign encouraging homosexual behavior as a protest to the law that prohibited homosexual propaganda. The police came to inspect the signs before the demonstration started. They confiscated the sign and detained the poor guy who held it just for a while, but did so. As many of us felt pity for the guy, I came with the brilliant idea that all of us started to shout out loud that we all encourage homosexual behavior. But now the police turned a deaf ear and did not interfere with the shouting. But we didn't give up. Immediately after the demonstration, I wrote a written confession of this clear violation of the law, asked people to sign it, and took it to the nearest police station. At least now the police had to react, They called everyone to be interrogated, and the papers went on to the public prosecutor. But the prosecutor did not want to embarrass himself by taking us to court, so instead he wrote a decision to drop the criminal charges, stating that this criminal act was conducted by, quote, youngsters lacking power of judgment and consideration. Later on, I had that decision posted on the board in my office. So what was this law about, and where did it come from? When Finland decriminalized homosexuality between adults over 18 years as late as 1971, decades after the other Nordic countries except Iceland, some members of the parliament were worried about what kind of sign this might give to the Finnish people. The Finnish Lutheran Church, through its board for family matters, issued a statement where they warned that, quote, homosexuality is a self-generated feature that easily can spread fast. And the Finnish Supreme Court stated that the criminal law had still not outplayed its role as the guardian of morality. Some members of parliament feared that the people would think that homosexuality is now accepted as a normal variation of sexual and human behavior. This despite the fact that homosexuality still was considered a psychiatric disease, and even if the proposed law still posed a higher age of consent for homosexual behavior than for heterosexuals, as if that would not have been stigmatizing enough. Especially one member of the parliament representing the Finnish Christian Party, an infamous psychiatric, advocated for the so-called seduction theory, in Finnish viettelyteoria, according to which homosexuality is a contagious behavior to which you can be seduced, and that especially young people were very vulnerable. The wording of this ban was added to the original law proposal and designed by the legislative committee of the parliament, in Finnish lakivaliokunta, and it is very labeling. The word they use for homosexual behavior comes directly from the Bible, and it has been then in the law also earlier since the criminalization of 1894, as we heard earlier. The word in Finnish is haureus, which is about the same as adultery or unchastity. It's remarkable that as late as 1971, they still wanted to use the same word, and it was not changed into, for example, homosexual behavior. According to this quickly designed paragraph, it was forbidden to, quote, publicly encourage adultery between members of the same sex. And the sentence could range from penalty until a maximum of 6 months in jail. Some voices were raised that this kind of legislation might be problematic in regard of the freedom of speech, but they were quickly silenced or voted down. The legislative committee of the parliament, where this new paragraph was designed, stated in a written justification of the new proposition that this paragraph should not be used to limit proper information about homosexuality. But in that same sentence, it continued saying that, quote, in the influence of mass media can be so profound that the damaging consequences of the crime in question can be tremendous. So they clearly raised a warning finger to mass media to pay attention. Based on the statements of the Legislative Committee, it's clear that the main purpose of this ban of homosexual propaganda was to send a message that homosexual behavior is not accepted and homosexual people are sick and should be cured. The only problem, of course, was that very few of us felt sick, and despite their wishes, we did not want to be cured. So what was the impact of this law that stayed in force until 1999? First of all, no one was ever convicted based on this paragraph. Some charges were proceeded to lower courts, but the charges were dismissed and the cases were never taken to the Supreme Court of Finland. So did it have any consequences at all? Yes, it did. In Finland, we were familiar with something called self-censorship, a term mainly used for post-war censorship regarding our relations with our big neighbor, the Soviet Union. Mainly, that same kind of self-censorship appeared concerning homosexuality, especially in the state-owned national Finnish broadcasting company, Yleisradio. One American TV program broadcasted by the state-owned Finnish, by Yleisradio in 1975 dealt with the MCC, the Gay Metropolitan Community Church in USA. This TV program led to a criminal investigation, but the police, but the charges were dropped without a trial, and after that, the TV program director had been given an internal written warning for that the program, quote, had intended to give a positive picture of homosexuality. This led to a written order to all program makers in the Finnish Broadcasting Company, which urged them to, quote, observe particular caution, including programs with proper information about homosexuality, because of the tense opinions of these matters, as they said. Note that in those days, there were no other radio channels operating in Finland and only a few television channels, so these rulings had a big impact on the whole TV and radio field in Finland. The one and only court case that went on from the lower court to the Court of Appeals was about a radio program that was broadcasted in 1976 over Yleisradio's Swedish-speaking radio channel, and which dealt with labor discrimination of homosexuals in Finland. I listened to that program before coming out as a gay person. I must say it had nothing to do with propaganda in favor of homosexuality. It was truly depressing and far from encouraging to listen to interviews with gay people being dismissed from their jobs due to their sexual orientation. Nevertheless, charges were raised against the reporter and the Swedish program director. The criminal charge stated that the program contained interviews with homosexuals that had praised their experiences and claimed that homosexuality was as acceptable as heterosexuality. That was a quote too. And that the program had intended to promote the status of homosexuality in the Finnish society. The verdict freed the accused, stating that homosexuality was not glorified in the program, and the program did not contain a direct request to homosexual behavior. This verdict was not taken to the Supreme Court for reconsideration. After that, a number of TV and radio programs were censored. One program with an interview with a Swedish award-winning author of novels for youngsters was censored and never broadcasted. Finnish TV documentary series produced by Yleisradio about ethnical and social minorities, including sexual minorities, was censored and never broadcasted. The censorship of these programs led to a total of 5 appeals to the UN Committee on Human Rights in Geneva, but the committee, in its decision of 1981, dismissed the charges based on the rule that gives the member states the right to consider what kind of restrictions of freedom of the freedom of speech are necessary to withhold the morality, and that this way may vary from state to state. The committee refused to hear the plaintiffs about the censored content in the programs. The committee argued that the censorship was not based on the Finnish law, but on internal rules of the broadcasting company. It clearly missed the point that Yleisradio was a state-owned monopoly, so its ruling was not that of a private company. The decision was later criticized by the UN International Law Commission for failing to take into consideration the content of the censored program instead of dealing with the internal rules of the Finnish broadcasting company. I myself, during my studies, worked as a radio announcer in that same company, the broadcasting company, the Swedish-speaking radio channel. I had scheduled an interview with a Swedish gay singer and activist, Jan Hammarlund, but I was forbidden to do so by that same program director that had been charged and dismissed in the court case I mentioned earlier. As far as I know, this written precaution order issued in 1975 was never withdrawn, but of course it fell into oblivion as time passed. Many attempts were made to repeal this propaganda ban, which was based on a false theory of homosexuality as a contagious disease. Petitions to the parliament to repeal this law were raised by several MPs, but they were just neglected. It took until 1999 until this shameful law was finally repealed from the law as part of a total reformation of the criminal code. At the same time, the age of consent was equalized for hetero and homosexual behaviors. It is remarkable that homosexuality was removed from the Finnish classification of diseases as early as 1981, but it took almost 2 decades after that decision to get rid of this relic of that same sickness label. Unfortunately, it took only 14 more years until Vladimir Putin copied the law to Russia, still in vigor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulf. That was very interesting. And for the audiences, I would also like to point out that if you are keen to reread maybe more of that, I highly recommend you this book, Rakkauden monet kasvot, that was published 1994, and where Ulf Månsson has written an article titled Synti, rikos, ihmisoikeus, oikeustaistelun historiaa ja nykypäivää, where you can sort of rehearse some more of this. As Ulf mentioned, this law was taken up or similar law was taken up in Russia 15 years later. Then it was repealed in Finland, but similar laws were also taking place in other countries, and one of them was UK. And as next we are going to see a pre-recorded video clip that is sent to us by Jo Paxton. Jo Paxton was a teacher in the UK, and she was also a lesbian activist. And in mid-1980s, she was caught in between her own activism and her own position as a teacher, as in the UK, the Section 28 was put in force, and that meant that homosexuality as a pretended family form should not be discussed in schools in any way. And we will hear Jo Paxton's presentation where she tells how she lived with that law. So please.
My name's Jo Paxton. I was a school teacher in England until July this year, and I have just retired. I went to a university in Scotland for my first degree and did my teacher education in England. And I worked in England all my teaching career starting in 1985. In the 1980s, about 75% of the UK population thought that being gay was quite simply wrong. This was the time when the occurrence of HIV and AIDS was rising, and the UK media wrongly described it as the gay plague. There was a book brought out by Susan Bosch called Jenny Lives with Eric and Martin. The book was aimed at school children, showing a young girl called Jenny living with her two gay fathers. It was actually meant to help children understand that there were different sorts of families, and was really, by today's standards, rather mild. In fact, the opposite happened. The Sun, a right-wing tabloid newspaper, described the book as vile. Many saw it as a homosexual recruiting manual designed to undermine Western civilization as we know it. In fact, the English version of it was published by the Gay Men's Press, so this was seen as definite proof that it was trying to recruit people. In 1987, at the Conservative Party annual conference, the then Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, said, and I quote, "Children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay. All of these children are being cheated of a sound start in life." Yes, cheated. Parliament itself worked itself into a moral panic about the whole thing, and the Tory MP drafted a new section, Section 28. This was to go into a piece of general legislation on local government reform. Section 28 came into force in 1988. This short section simply stated that an authority shall not intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality. A local authority shall not promote the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretend family relationship. There were no sanctions or punishments laid out for schools or local authorities who were found to have broken this law, and there never were any court prosecutions, although there were stories that I heard about people losing their jobs. However, this short and homophobic law had far-reaching effects on schools until it was abolished in 2000 in Scotland by the Scottish Parliament, and in 2003 in England and Wales after a lengthy campaign. As a university student at St Andrews in Scotland from 1979 to 1983, I had been a radical lesbian activist. After that, I then went to the University of Leeds to do my teacher training. And I started as a qualified teacher in 1984, just as the storm over the LGBT issue was gathering. I was 42 when Section 28 was repealed, so this issue dominated the first half of my working life. As the debate over Section 28 started, my lesbian friends and I joined an emerging group of activists to try and combat it. We met in groups to discuss and carry out action and consequences of the section. I even joined a mixed sex group, not something I would ever have previously wanted to do at all. In fact, rather ironically, the law became a catalyst uniting many previously separate groups. Lesbian, separatists, gay men, we were all in it together. We wrote letters to members of parliament, illegally put up posters on the streets, marched and demonstrated and raised funds to continue the fight. Others, with more quirky approaches, a group of lesbians invaded the BBC TV news studios and disrupted the evening news broadcast with shouts. And famously, 2 women abseiled down into the debating chamber of the House of Lords, which is the UK upper house of Parliament. That was what was going on outside school for me. Inside school, it was a very different story. Section 28 meant it became illegal for me as a teacher to promote homosexuality or even teach it that it was acceptable, because it was a pretended family relationship. So despite my activism outside of work, I stayed right in the closet in school, even with my colleagues. I did, however, sneak into the staff room and put a few posters up on the wall after hours, anonymously. I did challenge my colleagues' prejudices if they said something, but I was very reluctant to discuss anything about my private life with my colleagues, and I didn't join in any after-school activities or any social activities. I was basically too scared of outing myself, and I was really angry that they could talk about their families, their wives, their husbands, and I was having a pretend family relationship. It was even more difficult with the students. The gathering storm of homophobia made my life really difficult, and I could not be open about my sexuality. In 1987, as the law was being put in place, I was spotted kissing a girlfriend goodbye at the train station by a student. This sparked a torrent of hostile, bullying questions from students, mainly from my form, who were about 13, 14. They'd ask me questions like, do you like girls, miss? Who do you go out with? That sort of thing. And I felt really vulnerable. The rumours went around the school. Obviously, I was a lesbian, and I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody. I knew it was wrong. I was being bullied, but I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't talk to the principals, the teachers. I knew I wouldn't have the backup. And basically, the homophobic gossip just carried on, generations, and brothers and sisters, through different cohorts of the school. So it didn't leave me behind in that school. One upside of this actually was the kids got to know who the lesbian teacher was, and some of them would come and see me, and at lunchtime or break time, and they'd come and ask for advice and support from me, and I tried to support them as best I can. I never came out to anybody, but I tried to encourage them to be positive about themselves and try to offer them some kind of support. I was sad that I couldn't actually be a role model myself. This first school I stayed at for 16 years. When I moved to my next job in 2000, the atmosphere was starting to change. Tony Blair was leading a Labour government and undoing many of the Conservative policies. Section 28 was repealed in Scotland in 2000. And even though I was in England, I felt a bit more confident. It wasn't repealed until 2003 in England. But because things were changing, I felt more confident. I was in a new relationship and was happy and confident about talking about it. And when I did talk to my colleagues, there was no hostility. They were just interested to find out about the gay lifestyle. I also started to challenge homophobia in the classroom very, very strongly. British kids, they tend to call each other gay for any insult. Anything was gay that they didn't like. And I always stamped it out. But at that point, I was confident that should I meet any homophobia, I would have the complete backup of the school. one of the things I did was at the end of every lesson, I'd have a quiz, and it would be traditional to do boys versus girls, but I thought that was a bit too traditional. So what I would do is I'd have groups, teams of gay, lesbians, straight, bisexual, and the kids could choose whichever group they wanted to. And sometimes I would assign them to them. I'm saying, well, this is what you are. Let's see how you do with that. However, I didn't actually come out to any students until 2019. And it was really by accident. There were two girls chatting about, should have been doing their work, but they were chatting about one of their boyfriends. And I said to the other one, so do you have a boyfriend? And for some reason I said, or a girlfriend? And she said, no. She said, do you have a boyfriend? I said, no. And then she said, do you have a girlfriend? I said, yes. I would never have said that before. And I was really surprised. There was almost no reaction at all. And they just got on with the work. It just popped out, and I was quite surprised by that. This was a complete contrast to my previous experience, and how great it was. It was quite joyful. I was happy, but the world had changed, and I was older and wiser and far more confident teacher, and any homophobia would have been challenged by the school. It's sad when I look back that I've had to live a lie and in fear for half my teaching career because of Section 28. And it has stopped me helping young people as they're growing up and questioning their own sexuality. A couple of years ago, I was in a gay bar with some of my friends, and there was a young man who appeared from his group of male friends and came over to me and said, are you Joe Paxton? I said, yes. Did I used to teach you? And he said, oh, miss, you were awesome. So maybe I have made some difference to some of those children along the way. Thank you.
Well, that was quite touching, I'd say. I forgot to mention that even though Joe is not with us, Ulf Månsson is still listening to us and will return any of your questions, or will answer your questions if you have some. And also the audiences in the stream, if you have something, please add it to the chat and we will take it up after the next two presentations that we will have. The next one is going to reach us from Hungary, and Luka Dudic is the communication officer and a board member of Hatter Society, which is the equal of SETA in Finland. Luka graduated from the University College London with a BA in History, Politics and Economics. And she has worked with Eastern European minorities and is involved in several projects, including integration at the workplace and awareness-raising campaigns. And now I would invite Luka to join us, please.
Hi all, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. If I could just get confirmation that everyone can see my screen properly, that would, okay, perfect. Thank you. So my presentation will be about the current legal and political situation for the LGBTQI community in Hungary. Let's get started. So Hatter Society is the oldest and largest LGBTQI organization in Hungary. We have working for a society in which no one is discriminated because of their sexual orientation and gender identity. Hatter mostly provides support services, which you can see on the screen, but I will be talking about this later. So I put here the ILGA map. ILGA makes a report every year based on the legal and socio-political situation of the LGBTQI community. And as you can see, Hungary is basically in the middle with a 33% score. This is from 2020, but in 2021, Hungary remained with the same score. you can see that Finland literally has doubled the points, so it's a bit of a different situation. And I would like to also highlight that in 2012, Hungary was ranked 9th in Europe, which was the highest ranking Hungary has ever achieved. And then in 2020, Hungary has unfortunately sunk back to the 33rd place, and it remained there as well. So how could this happen? What was the reason for this stark decrease? Let's get into it. So I want to talk about the recent developments, what happened in Hungary. You have to know that in Hungary, the current government is a populist government. Orban is quite notorious for his conservatism and populism in Europe. The government has been using different social minority groups to use as scapegoats to gain political momentum and votes in elections. This was highlighted around 2014 with the refugee crisis, with their huge anti-migrant campaign that also resulted in the fence being built on the southern border of Hungary. And basically, they could really push the angle of the anti-immigration, the, as they like to say, the last defendants of Europe and Christian conservative culture around 2018. And then because of the fence and because of the international attention that has decreased about the refugee crisis, they kind of needed a new scapegoat. And in the beginning of 2019, we have seen that there was a shift in the government's focus. And it was in January that they started to promote conversion therapies that cured homosexuality, quote unquote, cured, of course, in public media. And this was the first instance when they started to approach LGBTQI identities, same-sex relationships, with regards of this being something that can be cured, and that is something wrong with LGBTQI people. Later, a Fidesz politician actually said that in the moral sense, same-sex adoption is morally equal to to pedophilia, because it is completely out of a selfish act. Unfortunately, there has been no legal consequence of this statement either. And then later in 2019, in October, Coca-Cola was fined for featuring a same-sex couple in its advertisements for a campaign that was called Love is Love. Again, the reason why the Consumer Protection Authority fined the corporation was because they claimed that they hindered the psychological, mental, and physical development of children and adolescents who have seen these advertisements with, again, the lesbian couple embracing each other in the billboards. Then in May 2020, the legal gender recognition for trans and intersex people was banned in Hungary. This means that trans and intersex people are at risk of discrimination, harassment, and violence every time they have to present the documentation that is not in line with their gender identity and or their appearance. Later in 2020, there was a book published that was titled Wonderland is for Everyone, that also featured LGBTQI characters amongst other minorities. And local bans have been instated against the book. So there are some kindergartens and some schools that have banned the book, and teachers are forbidden from using it or from reading from it. And there is also an investigation launched against the Lesbian Association that published the book as of whether they have also hindered the physical mental development of children and adolescents. In 2020 of November, the Equal Treatment Authority of Hungary was also abolished, which means that the last public body that really stood up for LGBTQI rights was abolished, and it is now part of the Ombudsperson's office, who is unfortunately with close ties to the government and has been completely ignorant about LGBTQI issues since he got into office. Just a month later, there was an amendment to the constitution that now says that the father is a man and the mother is a woman in every family, which has never been disputed by anyone, probably. And they also installed a ban on adoption by people out of wedlock, which is very conventional for them, because in Hungary, only heterosexual people can get married. Same-sex relationships can only result in registered civil partnerships, which unfortunately does not allow them for a joint adoption. And this was explicitly, as the minister has said, this was explicitly to reduce the chance of LGBTQI people adopting children. And finally, in a few months ago, in June 2021, a ban was introduced on the portrayal and promotion of LGBTQI identities to minors in media, in education, and in advertisements. Now, we call this the propaganda law because it is eerily similar to the law that was, as Ulf has said earlier, that was passed in Russia in 2013. We think that it was probably inspired by that very law. And it is also, I really like the similarities of the previous presentations, that this ban, although it has an umbrella ban on portrayal promotion of LGBTQI identities to minors in all areas of life, there is no sanctions apart from those three areas. But in the last 5 months that it has been part of the legal framework, there has been no case whatsoever that was persecuted because of this ban. So we think that it is more of a way to cause self-censorship and the chilling effect on society, to silence the people, to make them feel that they cannot be discussing this in public, and to unfortunately erase LGBTQI identities and to stigmatize them more. This obviously leads to the deteriorating social acceptance, the polarization of societies, widespread discrimination and violence, invisibility, and the erasure of LGBTQI issues and people. I think I am running out of time, so I will wrap it up and leave some time for the questions later. And I will be talking about our response and counter narratives hopefully later. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Luca. That was rather distressing and depressing, I have to say. But I think it's good to know what's going on elsewhere. And next we are going to have Alisa Tsabenko telling us about the situation in Russia. Alisa is, as I check here, a doctoral candidate at the University of Helsinki in gender studies. She works on the topic of lesbian mothering in Russia in a historical perspective from the late Soviet period to contemporary times. She has been looking at how the changes in the Russian legislation concerning homosexuality have influenced the everyday lives of lesbian mothers. Alisa worked closely with the LGBTQ organizations in St. Petersburg and Moscow and continues following the topic of queer in Russia. And this is what she will be telling us now. Welcome, Alisa.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be today at this event. And I will now start sharing my screen. So until 1993, consensual anal intercourse between adult males was punishable under Article 121.1 of the Russian Federation Criminal Code by imprisonment of up to 5 years. Lesbian relationships were not criminalized. Under strong pressure from Western public opinion, and in order to obtain a place in the Council of Europe, Russian President Boris Yeltsin followed the line of revoking anti-homosexual legislation, and Article 121.1 was repealed as part of a wide-ranging reform law that he signed on April 21, 1993. And then Healy, in his book, noticed that LGBT activists had not influenced much on the decriminalization of homosexuality. The silence about same-sex relationships was preconditioned by the legislative and social situation of that period, just before decriminalization. One of my interview partners called this silence the Damocles sword of Stalin's laws. This silence made it difficult to accept the other desire. Even though the Stalin's era had been gone for some time, the laws that criminalized homosexuality were still predominant. This era was represented by difficult conditions for all USSR citizens, including marginalized groups of people who had same-sex desire or were in same-sex relationships. Nevertheless, Dana Heller noticed that Russian laws and attitudes towards homosexuality from 1930s to 1950s were not dramatically harsher than those in a number of Western countries, including Nazi Germany, Britain, and the United States, where mass extermination, eugenic theories, castration, and political demonization were exercised as solution to the homosexual threat. While lesbian identity didn't exist during the late Soviet period, women with whom I spoke during my research project talked explicitly about their lesbian experience and their other desire that shaped their lives. A life with such desire, one different from the expectations of the state and society alike, was not smooth, often filled with contradictions. But family, the mothering experience, happiness, and same-sex relationships fully completed the everyday lives of these women. The criminalization of homosexuality, whilst concerned only with homosexuality amongst men, impacted the self-understanding and the life expectations of women who experienced the other desire during the Soviet era. Comparisons of the whole to a prison that emerged during my conversation represented an inherited and common social history. Previously, because of the lack of community, lesbian women constantly missed out on the possibility to share details from their lives with others. It is thus unsurprising that my interviewees discussed feeling as though they lived in a black hole imprisoned by their desire. For example, Olga provided the following reflection. I lived in a prison of my own, in my own shell, communicating only with my children and continuing dreaming about having a woman next to me. Maria stated the following about her life after decriminalization in 1993. This is a ghetto for me. It's no longer the whole, it was before, and this is already better. I feel good like this. I'm here among my people. I don't want to go into the world. I feel bad there. They don't understand me, and I don't understand them. The decriminalization law that took effect in 1993 undoubtedly changed the lives of lesbians. They all came out to their children just after decriminalization happened. These women hid their other desire their entire lives without the possibility of coming out of the closet. But in the halls and ghettos after that, for these women, the notion that their children would accept their desires made a huge difference to them. The creation of lesbian space required more visibility for lesbians. Visibility had been built with creating of lesbian journals and magazines, organization of lesbian clubs, and lesbian bars and lesbian cultural events. Galina Zelenina started her article about queers in 90s by describing her experience in fighting a gay bar in Moscow. Wind was blowing, snow glued up our eyes. We almost blindly had been weaving in backyards. Finally, we found that we had been looking for. On the door that led to the basement room, no sign, of course. There was a sticker, pink triangle with the caption, Silencio, silence. The door was locked. If one wants, there could be seen a metaphor for the Russian gay movement of 90s. In early 2000s, Russia was under a liberal and informational flow. Internet and other informational sources became available and developed intensively. LGBTQ community gained more freedoms, but was still underrepresented and not visible because of that. And this exactly helped people to experiment with their choices in private life, but interrupted the development of activist movements, even though some development was reached in big cities. In Moscow, they organized an umbrella organization, Russian LGBT Network. LGBT organization coming out was introduced in St. Petersburg, movie festival Side by Side, cultural festival Queer Fest, and others. The Russian federal law on propaganda related to non-traditional sexual relations among minors, also known in the English language media as the gay propaganda law and the anti-gay law, enacted in 2013. Before the anti-gay law passed at the federal level, following a title change, individual regions passed legislation penalizing the dissemination of material promoting homosexualism and pedophilia among minors. At the federal level, the title of the law was amended, whereby the term homosexualism was changed to non-traditional sexual relations, because no legal definitions for homosexualism existed in the legislation of Russian Federation. Yelena Mizulina, one of the authors and promoters of the anti-gay law, explained that they amended the term homosexualism and the title of the law in order to avoid promoting it through enactment of the law. These recent changes in the legislation also represented crucial milestone in the development of a traditional values ideology in Russia, and influenced various areas of social life, including family life and parenting for LGBTQ community. The anti-gay law also brought anxiety to LGBTQ people, while their lives were already under pressure from the anti-queer climate in society and the lack of important rights for their families. The change in the legislation worsened the situation. Fear has been always a familiar feeling within Russian queer communities since homosexuality was criminalized during Stalin's era in 1933. And as Joanna Mizilinska has noted, history is not a linear movement from oppression to liberation. After a somewhat enlightened period of liberalization from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, the legislation in 2013 changed the situation and resulted in lesbians returning to their closets. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Alisa. I think it's a very, very accurate and sad sort of truth of history, that history is not a linear development only, but there can be drawbacks. And while we are this year now, 2021, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the decriminalization of homosexual deeds in Finland, we are also celebrating the law of the ban of incitement that was put in place in that very same year. So, and as we saw, the situation has been developing not so well in Russia and in Hungary, for example. And we also hear sad news from Poland. We have a couple of minutes for questions. I wonder if there are any in the chat, or do you have some questions maybe here in the audience?
At least in the chat and in the stream, all these presentations have stirred discussion or comments that people are really interested in these. And there was some speculation about, well, this might be directed to Jo Paxton, but she's not here. So there was some speculation about why gays and lesbians were so separated before their joint fight against the Section 28. And well, Eva in the chat already discussed a bit that in different places lesbians were might have been in bigger organizations or more locally in smaller groups. So it's also a matter of the structure of the organizations of that time.
Yeah, and it can also be that maybe the mixed lesbian and gay organizations were very male-dominated at that time, and also many lesbians were part of the feminist movement, and that took lesbians and gays apart. However, they were brought together in the fight against the Section 28. Before we continue, I would also like to add that if you are curious about the activism that took place in Finland against the ban of incitement, I would also recommend you the MA thesis of Tarja Hautanen, which she wrote about the SETA of Turku, titled Yksityistilaisuus, where she's vividly discussing the activism against the ban of excitement and the demonstrations that took place in Turku. And likewise, if you're curious to know about the 1980s activism that took place in the UK, and you happen to be in Tampere in the 18th this month, there's going to be a film show in the movie theater Niagara titled Rebel Dykes, which is about the lesbian activism that took place there, also against Section 28, but also some other issues. Any questions here in the audience, maybe? If not so, we are now moving on to have the break.
There's still one question,
okay,
actually.
Thank you.
Kaisa asks in the chat, I would also love to know what kinds of source material Alisa used for research.
Alisa, if you're still with us, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For my research, I'm mostly using interviews with lesbian mothers of different age. So because I'm researching from late Soviet period, so I try to reach different age lesbians. Then I'm also using documents and expert interviews with activists and experts in the field. Then also archival materials that I found in private LGBT archive in Moscow, and internet sources too, because a huge amount of materials from 2000s still kept in, for example, LiveJournal platform and different other blog platforms in the internet. So I'm different. Also, I'm using one more source. It's online survey that I conducted with the LGBT organization coming out in 2013 as a side materials. So I'm also using that. So different materials.
Thank you, Alisa. Okay, I think now it's a good time to have the little break before we continue with the different facilitator, and Wisam is going to take my place. Thank you for the time being.